My parents gave our family metal shop to my brother because I'm just a welder, so I stopped working 80 hours a week for free. Sawyer, you're a great welder, but Colton has the business education to take this company to the next level. This is about the future, not just hard work. That's what my dad Frank said last Sunday when he announced he was transferring ownership of our family metal shop to my younger brother. So I told him he was absolutely right. It was about the future, which is why I'd be working normal employee hours starting Monday, and the educated owner could handle the 2 a.m. emergency calls from now on. I'm Sawyer, 29M, and I've been working at Blackwood Metal Works since I was 16 years old. Started sweeping floors and running parts, learned to weld by 18, became our master fabricator by 22, and for the last 7 years, I've essentially been running day-to-day operations while Dad focused on the big picture. I work 80-hour weeks regularly, take emergency calls at all hours, handle our biggest client relationships, and know every machine, process, and supplier in our operation. My brother Colton, 26M, has a business degree from Arizona State and worked summers at the shop during college. He's smart, clean-cut, great with spreadsheets, and can talk business strategy with anyone. He's also never run a welding torch for more than a few hours at a time, doesn't know our clients personally, and has never worked a full-time week in production. But apparently that business degree makes him more qualified to own a metalworking shop than 13 years of building the operation from the ground up. Let me give you some context about what I've built at this place. When I started full-time at 18, we had 3 employees and did mostly small repair jobs. I spent years developing relationships with contractors, architects, and industrial clients. I personally brought in Harrison Steel Corporation, our biggest account that represents about 40% of our revenue, a $2 million annual contract for custom fabrication work. Marcus Flynn, their procurement manager, calls me directly when they need quotes or have technical questions. Their engineers trust my input on material specifications and production timelines. When they have rush jobs or quality concerns, they ask for me specifically, not whoever's available at Blackwood Metal. Over the years, I've also landed contracts with 3 major construction companies, 2 mining operations, and a handful of custom architectural projects. These aren't accounts that came to us. These are relationships I built through quality work, meeting deadlines, and understanding what clients actually need versus what they think they need. I've also trained every welder we've hired in the last decade, implemented our quality control processes, and designed our workflow to maximize efficiency. When we upgraded our CNC equipment 2 years ago, I researched the options, negotiated with vendors, and trained everyone on the new systems. Colton spent those years studying business theory and working summer internships at accounting firms. The conversation that changed everything happened last Sunday at family dinner. Mom had made pot roast, everyone was in a good mood, and Dad seemed unusually formal when he asked everyone to stay for coffee. "Linda and I have been talking about the future of the business," he said, looking around the table. "We're not getting any younger, and it's time to think about succession planning." I felt a surge of excitement. After 13 years of pouring everything into this company, the conversation I'd been hoping for was finally happening. "We've decided to begin transferring ownership to Colton," Dad continued. "He'll take over majority control over the next 2 years, with full ownership by the time he's 30. The room went quiet. I literally thought I'd misheard him. "Dad, are you talking about the shop?" I asked. "Of course. Blackwood Metal Works. Colton has the educational background and business acumen to modernize our operations and expand into new markets." I looked at Colton, who was staring at his coffee cup and looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Colton, did you know about this?" "Dad and I have been discussing it for a few months," he said quietly. "I told him I thought we should involve you in the planning." "Involve me in planning my own displacement?" Mom jumped in. "Sawyer, nobody's displacing you. You'll still be our lead welder, probably shop foreman eventually. This is about ownership and strategic direction." "Strategic direction of a business I've been running for 7 years?" Dad's voice got firm. "You've been running production, Sawyer. That's different from running a business. Colton understands profit margins, market analysis, business development. Those are the skills we need to grow. What about client relationships? What about knowing how to actually deliver what we promise? What about understanding our capabilities and limitations?" Those are important operational details, and we'll rely on your expertise for that. But ownership requires a broader perspective. I sat there processing what I was hearing. Operational details. Like the relationships that generate 80% of our revenue were just details. Like knowing how to actually build what clients order was just an operational concern. So I'm good enough to work 80-hour weeks and manage client relationships and train employees and handle emergencies, but I'm not good enough to own the business I've built? You didn't build this business, son. Your grandfather and I built it. You've been a valuable contributor, but there's a difference. A valuable contributor? Dad, I brought in Harrison Steel. I brought in Southwestern Construction. I designed our current workflow, trained our entire crew, and handle every major technical decision we make. What exactly did I contribute to, if not building this business? Colton finally spoke up. Sawyer, maybe we can structure this so you have equity too, like a partnership. A partnership where the partner who's never run a full production week owns the company, and the partner who's run it for 7 years gets to be a minority stakeholder. The conversation got heated from there. Mom kept talking about Colton's education and professional appearance. Dad kept emphasizing the need for business-minded leadership. Colton kept trying to play peacemaker, suggesting compromises that still put him in charge. Finally, I stood up. You know what? You're absolutely right. Colton has the education, and I'm just a welder. So starting Monday, I'll work like an employee instead of an owner. 40 hours a week, no more emergency calls, no more weekend projects. The new owner can handle all that business-minded leadership stuff. Sawyer, don't be dramatic, Mom said. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical. If my role is lead welder, then I'll do lead welder work during lead welder hours. Everything else is management responsibility now. I left that night feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. 13 years of assuming I was working toward inheriting the family business, and it turns out I was just the hired help who happened to share a last name. But I meant what I said about working employee hours. Monday morning, I showed up at 7 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. When our Harrison Steel deadline looked tight, I worked exactly until 3:30 p.m. and left, instead of staying until 9 p.m. like usual. When Marcus Flynn called Tuesday evening with a technical question about their current project, I let it go to voicemail. Sawyer, why didn't you answer Marcus's call? Dad asked Wednesday morning. Because I was off work. The new owner can handle client calls after hours. You know Colton doesn't have the technical background for that conversation. Then maybe the new owner should learn the technical side of the business he's inheriting. By Thursday, Colton was asking me questions about production schedules, material specifications, and client preferences, stuff I've been handling automatically for years. He was taking notes like he was cramming for an exam, which I guess he was. Friday afternoon, Marcus Flynn called the main office looking for me. Colton took the call. Sawyer's in production right now, Colton told him. I'm Colton Blackwood. I'll be taking over more of the client relationship management. How can I help you? From what I heard later, Marcus asked some technical questions about heat treatment specifications for their current order. Colton tried to answer based on notes he'd taken from our conversations, got the details wrong, and told Marcus we could definitely meet a deadline that I knew was impossible with our current workload. Marcus called me directly on my cell phone an hour later. Sawyer, I just talked to someone at your office who seemed confused about our project specs. Is everything okay over there? Everything's fine, Marcus. There are some management changes happening, but the work quality will remain the same. Management changes? Are you leaving? No. I'm staying in production. My brother Colton is taking over more of the business side. I see. Well, I prefer working with you directly. You understand our requirements better than anyone. That conversation planted a seed that I didn't fully appreciate until this week, when everything started falling apart for the business-minded leadership. It's been 2 weeks since the ownership announcement, and the cracks are starting to show. Colton's been working 60-hour weeks trying to learn everything I do automatically. Dad's been stressed about deadlines that are slipping, and Mom's been making comments about how I'm not being a team player. But the team decided I wasn't management material, so I'm playing my assigned position. And it turns out the business runs differently when the person who actually knows how everything works limits himself to normal employee hours. Tomorrow, Marcus Flynn is coming for a quality inspection on Harrison Steel's current project. Normally, I'd spend the weekend preparing documentation, reviewing our processes, and making sure every detail is perfect. This weekend, I'm going fishing. Let's see how that business education handles a $2 million client relationship. Reddit, am I being petty, or am I just giving my family exactly what they asked for? Update 1. Holy crap, you guys. I knew things were going to get interesting, but I didn't expect the wheels to come off this fast. Thanks for all the responses on my original post. Reading your comments helped me realize I wasn't being unreasonable. I was just finally treating myself like the employee my family decided I was. Here's what happened with Marcus Flynn's inspection and the aftermath that has my phone blowing up with family members telling me I'm sabotaging the business. Monday morning, Marcus showed up for the quality review of Harrison Steel's current project. It's a big job. Custom structural components for a mining facility expansion, about $180,000 in fabrication work. Normally, I'd walk him through every piece, explain our processes, and address any concerns he might have. It's the kind of hand-holding that keeps major clients happy and coming back. Instead, I was at my welding station working on production pieces when Colton walked Marcus through the shop. I waved hello and went back to work. As far as I was concerned, client relations were now management's responsibility. I could hear pieces of their conversation as they moved through the shop. Marcus was asking technical questions about heat treatment, weld penetration, and stress testing procedures. Colton was giving answers that sounded right but were slightly off in ways that matter a lot in structural work. "What about the stress relief on these joints?" Marcus asked, pointing to a critical connection point. "We follow standard procedures for all stress relief," Colton answered confidently. "The problem is, Harrison Steel doesn't use standard procedures. They have specific requirements that are 20% more stringent than industry standard because their applications are more demanding. I've been following their custom specs for 5 years. But apparently that's just an operational detail that doesn't matter for business ownership." Marcus caught the discrepancy immediately. "Standard procedures? I thought Blackwood understood our enhanced specifications." "Of course, yes, our enhanced procedures," Colton backtracked. "Sawyer handles those details." "Can I speak with Sawyer about the testing documentation?" That's when Colton came over to my station. "Hey, can you walk Marcus through the testing procedures for their job?" "I'm in the middle of production work," I said, not looking up from my welding. "Maybe schedule a meeting when I'm not on the floor. It'll just take a few minutes." "Sorry, I need to focus on this weld. Safety first, you know. The new owner can handle client questions." I watched Colton's face flush red. He couldn't exactly order me to drop everything for a client meeting. That would make it obvious he couldn't handle the technical side himself. And he couldn't admit to Marcus that he didn't know our testing procedures without looking incompetent. Marcus ended up leaving without the detailed review he'd come for, and I could tell he wasn't happy. He shook hands with Colton politely, but I've worked with him long enough to recognize when he's concerned about quality control. That afternoon, I got a text from Marcus. "Call me when you have a few minutes. Some concerns about the current project." I waited until after 5 p.m. to call him back. "Sawyer, I'm a little confused about what's happening over there. The person I met with today didn't seem familiar with our specifications. Colton's still learning the technical side. He's more focused on business development." "I see. Well, Harrison Steel has always valued the personal attention and expertise you've provided. Is that going to continue?" "I'm staying in production, but my role is changing. Business relationships are being handled at a higher level now." Long pause. "What does that mean for our projects?" "It means you'll probably be working more with Colton and my dad going forward. I'll still be doing the fabrication work. Sawyer, we're not just buying fabrication services. We're paying for expertise, technical consultation, and reliability. That's why we've been loyal to Blackwood for 5 years." "I understand, Marcus. Those are decisions above my pay grade now." Another pause. "I think Harrison Steel needs to reevaluate our supplier relationships. We'll complete the current project, but I need to discuss future contracts with my team." He hung up politely, but I knew exactly what that meant. Marcus was diplomatic, but reevaluate our supplier relationships is corporate speak for we're taking our business elsewhere. I didn't mention the call to anyone at work. If they wanted to handle business relationships at a higher level, they could discover the consequences at a higher level too. Wednesday morning, Dad pulled me into his office. "Sawyer, we need to talk about your attitude lately." "My attitude?" "You're not being supportive of Colton's transition into leadership. He's trying to learn the business, and you're making it difficult." "How am I making it difficult? I'm doing my job during work hours." "Your job includes helping clients and supporting business operations. When Marcus Flynn asks for information, you can't just refer him to someone else." "Why not? You said Colton has the business acumen to handle client relationships. I'm just giving him space to demonstrate that business education." "Don't be smart with me. You know Marcus prefers working with you personally." "Then maybe you should have considered that before deciding I wasn't qualified to own the business that depends on those relationships." Dad's voice got harder. "This family business is bigger than your hurt feelings, son. We need everyone working together." "We are working together. I'm working as an employee. Colton's working as an owner. That's the structure you wanted. I want you to get back to handling the Harrison Steel relationship directly." "I thought ownership required a broader perspective than operational details like client relationships." "Sawyer." "Dad, I'm happy to do whatever you want. Just clarify my role. Am I management or am I production? Because if I'm management, I'd like to discuss my equity position. If I'm production, then management handles client relations during business hours, and I handle fabrication." He dismissed me without resolving anything, but I could see the stress lines around his eyes. Running a business is different when you can't count on someone working 80 hours a week to cover for gaps in leadership. Thursday brought the first real crisis. Southwestern Construction called with a rush job, a structural repair that needed to be completed over the weekend to avoid shutting down an entire project. It's the kind of emergency work that's profitable but requires immediate technical assessment and rapid turnaround. Colton took the call and tried to give them a timeline based on what he thought our capabilities were. He quoted them a delivery date that was impossible unless someone worked all weekend and made some technical compromises that would meet code but not exceed it. In the old days, I would have stayed all weekend, figured out the technical challenges, and delivered exactly what they needed while exceeding their quality expectations. It's the kind of service that keeps construction companies loyal. Instead, I worked my normal Friday shift, and when 3:30 p.m. came, I went home. Colton spent Friday evening trying to figure out how to deliver what he'd promised, realized he couldn't, and had to call Southwestern back to revise the timeline. They weren't happy. Rush jobs are about reliability, and we'd just proven we couldn't deliver what we promised. This morning, Dad called me at 7 a.m. "We lost the Southwestern rush job. They went with Morrison Metal instead." "That's unfortunate. Morrison does good work." "Sawyer, you know we could have handled that job if you'd worked the weekend." "Could we have?" "Because the new owner quoted the timeline without consulting production. Maybe the business-minded leadership should learn to check capabilities before making promises." "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your attitude is hurting the business." "My attitude?" "Dad, I'm doing exactly what you asked. You wanted Colton to own the business, so he owns the business decisions. I'm just a welder now. Remember?" The conversation ended with Dad accusing me of sabotage and me pointing out that sabotage would involve actually doing something wrong, not just limiting myself to employee responsibilities. But here's the thing that's really got me thinking. I'm not angry anymore. The first week, I was hurt and resentful. Now I'm just curious. Curious to see how long a business can run when the person who actually knows how everything works limits himself to normal hours and defined responsibilities. Marcus Flynn called again yesterday. Harrison Steel is accelerating their timeline for selecting new suppliers. They want to minimize disruption to their operations, which means they're planning to transition away from us faster than originally planned. I haven't told anyone at work about that call either. Management can discover the consequences of their decisions the same way they made them, without consulting the person who actually knows how things work. Colton pulled me aside yesterday afternoon. "Sawyer, I know this transition has been difficult. Can we grab a beer after work and talk through some things?" "Sorry, I've got plans after work. Maybe schedule something during business hours." "Business hours are pretty busy with me trying to learn everything." "Yeah, running a business is time-consuming. Good thing you've got that education to help figure it out." He looked genuinely hurt, and part of me felt bad. Colton's not a bad guy. He's just been handed something he didn't earn and doesn't understand. But that's not my problem anymore. My problem is being the best employee I can be during the hours I'm paid to work. Tomorrow is Monday, and we're starting our third week of this new structure. Dad and Colton are working 60-plus-hour weeks trying to manage what I used to handle automatically. I'm working exactly 40 hours and sleeping better than I have in years. The business that was supposedly too complex for just a welder to understand is starting to crack under the leadership of someone with business education, but no operational experience. Let's see how that business degree handles the next crisis. Update 2. You guys predicted this would get dramatic, but even I didn't expect nuclear. What happened this week has completely changed my family's perspective on who's actually valuable to the business, and the conversations I'm having now are very different from 3 weeks ago. First, thanks again for all the support. Your comments have been incredibly validating, especially from those of you in family businesses or trades. Knowing that other people have seen this dynamic helps me feel less crazy about the whole situation. So here's what went down that changed everything. Monday morning started with what I thought was just another client problem. Dad called me into his office looking more stressed than I'd seen him in years. Marcus Flynn from Harrison Steel called this morning. They're not renewing their contract. Oh, that's too bad. They've been a good client. Sawyer, they represent 40% of our revenue. This isn't just too bad. This is a crisis. What did he say was the reason? He said they've lost confidence in our ability to provide the level of technical support they need. He specifically mentioned concerns about quality control and project management. I nodded sympathetically. That's unfortunate. Maintaining client relationships is challenging. Dad stared at me for a moment. He asked to speak with you directly. Said Harrison Steel's position might be different if you were handling their projects personally. Did you transfer him to me? You were in production. I told Colton to call him back. How did that go? Not well. Marcus told Colton that Harrison Steel needs a primary contact who understands their technical requirements and can make real-time decisions about their projects. Colton tried to explain that he's developing that expertise, but Marcus said they can't afford to wait for someone to learn on their projects. I maintained my sympathetic expression while internally noting that Marcus was being more diplomatic than the situation deserved. What he'd actually told Colton, based on my conversation with Marcus the day before, was that Harrison Steel had already identified 2 alternative suppliers and would be transitioning their work over the next 60 days. That's a tough position for Colton, I said. Learning complex client relationships takes time. Sawyer, I need you to call Marcus back and see if we can salvage this. Dad, I'm not in client relations anymore, remember? That's ownership responsibility now. This is about saving the business. This is about the consequences of business decisions. You decided I wasn't qualified to own a business that depends on client relationships. Now you're discovering what happens when those relationships are managed by someone who doesn't understand them. The conversation got heated from there, with Dad accusing me of letting my pride hurt the family business, and me pointing out that the family business had decided my contributions weren't valuable enough for ownership. Fine, he said finally. What would it take for you to call Marcus back? A formal offer to discuss my equity position in the business. Equity position? Sawyer, we've already made the succession decision. Then you've also made the decision about who handles the Harrison Steel relationship. The new owner can figure it out. I left his office and went back to production. 20 minutes later, Colton came over to my station. Sawyer, can we please talk about Marcus Flynn? I know I'm in over my head here. That's between you and Dad. I'm just doing production work now. Look, I know you're angry about the ownership decision, but we can't let that hurt our biggest client relationship. I'm not angry, and I'm not letting anything hurt the client relationship. I'm just staying in my lane as a production employee. What if we structured some kind of partnership deal for you? What kind of partnership? I don't know. Maybe you handle operations and client relations. I handle business development and administration. So I do all the work that generates revenue, and you handle the paperwork and get majority ownership? He didn't have an answer for that. Tuesday brought the second major blow. Southwestern Construction called to cancel a upcoming project worth about $320,000. They'd decided to go with Morrison Metal instead, citing reliability concerns after we'd missed the deadline on their rush job. When Dad told me about the cancellation, I asked if he'd discussed it with the new owner. Colton's doing his best to manage these relationships. I'm sure he is. Learning business ownership is challenging. Sawyer, we're looking at losing over $600,000 in annual revenue in 1 week. That's significant. Good thing the new owner has business education to help develop new clients. Wednesday was when the panic really set in. Our third largest client, Mesa Industrial, called to express concerns about a current project. They'd been trying to reach someone who could answer technical questions about material specifications. But Colton didn't have the expertise, and I was unavailable during their calls. I was working production and didn't take non-emergency calls anymore. Dad tried to handle the Mesa call himself, but he's been out of day-to-day operations for 5 years and didn't know the current specifications for their project. The call ended with Mesa saying they'd reevaluate their supplier relationships if they couldn't get consistent technical support. That's when Dad called the family meeting. Thursday evening, both parents and Colton showed up at my apartment. Not invited, just showed up. "We need to talk," Dad said. "About what?" "About the fact that you're destroying the business to prove a point." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm working as a production employee, which is what you decided my role should be." Mom jumped in. "Sawyer, you're being vindictive. This business supports the whole family." "No, this business supports the owner. I'm just an employee now." Colton looked miserable. "Sawyer, I never wanted this to divide the family. Maybe we can work out a different arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Dad took over. "We're prepared to offer you a 20% ownership stake in exchange for resuming your previous responsibilities." Previous responsibilities with 20% ownership, while Colton gets 60% ownership for learning the business I've been running for 7 years? Colton brings business skills and educational background. Colton brings theoretical knowledge about business operations. I bring actual relationships worth over $1 million in annual revenue. Which one matters more for a metalworking shop? The conversation went in circles for an hour. They wanted me to save the client relationships while maintaining the ownership structure that excluded me from real authority. I wanted either equal partnership based on actual contribution or employee treatment based on employee ownership. Finally, Mom played what she thought was the trump card. "If this business fails, it affects all of us. Your father's retirement, our family legacy, Colton's future. Are you really willing to destroy all that because you're upset about ownership percentages?" "Mom, I'm not destroying anything. I'm just not subsidizing it anymore. For 13 years, I worked 80-hour weeks to build something I thought would be mine someday. You decided it should belong to someone else. Fine. But you don't get to keep my 80-hour weeks while giving me 20% ownership. So what do you want? Equal ownership or employee treatment? Pick one." They left without resolution, but I could see in Dad's eyes that he was finally understanding the math. The business needed my client relationships and operational knowledge more than it needed Colton's business degree. Friday morning, I got a call that changed everything. "Sawyer, this is David Morrison from Morrison Metal Works. I hear you might be available for some consulting work." Word had gotten around the industry that I was being sidelined at Blackwood. Morrison, our biggest competitor, was offering me a consulting contract to help them service the clients who were leaving us. "That's an interesting offer, David. What kind of consulting?" "Project management and client relations for some accounts we're taking over. Specifically, we've been approached by Harrison Steel and Southwestern Construction about ongoing work." "I see. Would you be interested in discussing terms? We could structure something that doesn't interfere with your current employment." I told him I'd think about it, but the implications were clear. Our former clients weren't just leaving Blackwood, they were actively seeking to work with me at a different company. The relationships belonged to me, not to the business. I didn't tell anyone at work about Morrison's call. Not yet. This weekend, I'm going to make a decision about whether to try saving my family's business or helping their competitor take over our client base. Funny how quickly things change when you stop doing other people's work for free. Monday should be very interesting. Final update time for the final chapter of this family business drama. What happened after my last update completely restructured our company and taught everyone some expensive lessons about the difference between education and experience. The Monday after Morrison Metal's job offer was when everything came to a head. I walked into work that morning having made my decision about their consulting offer, but I wanted to give my family one final chance to show they understood what was actually happening to their business. Dad was waiting for me when I arrived. "We need to talk immediately," he said, looking like he hadn't slept all weekend. "About what?" "Harrison Steel called Friday afternoon. Marcus Flynn wanted me to know they're transitioning all their work to Morrison Metal. And they specifically requested you as their project manager." "That's interesting." "Interesting? Sawyer, they told Morrison they'd only work with them if you were handling their projects. Our biggest client is following you to our biggest competitor. That seems like a management problem. Don't play games with me. Are you going to work for Morrison?" I sat down across from his desk. "Dad, that depends entirely on whether working for my family is worth more than working for people who actually value my contributions." "We value your contributions. You value my contributions when you need them to save your business. You don't value them enough to give me ownership of the business they built." "What do you want, Sawyer? Just tell me what you want." That's when I laid out my terms. Not a negotiation, not a request. My final offer. Equal ownership with Colton, or I take the Morrison contract and help them service the clients who are leaving anyway. Equal ownership? That's not fair to Colton. Fair to Colton? Dad, I've generated about 60% of our revenue over the last 5 years. Colton's generated 0%. How is equal ownership unfair to him? His education and business skills. His education is theoretical. My skills are proven. Every major client we have chooses to work with me personally. That's not theory. That's measurable business value. The conversation ended with Dad saying he needed to discuss it with Mom and Colton before making any decisions. Tuesday brought another crisis. Mesa Industrial called to formally terminate their contract, citing inconsistent technical support as the reason. When Dad asked them directly what it would take to maintain the relationship, they said they'd need guaranteed access to me for all technical decisions. "But Sawyer's not in client relations anymore," Dad explained. "Then we'll work with someone who is," Mesa replied. By Wednesday, we'd lost about $900,000 in annual contracts, with more clients expressing concerns about our ability to provide the level of service they were used to. Wednesday afternoon, Colton came to my welding station and asked if we could talk privately. "Sawyer, I think I need to step back from this ownership thing." "Why's that?" "Because I'm failing at running a business I don't understand, and watching our clients leave because they want to work with you specifically." It was the first completely honest conversation we'd had in months. "I thought I could learn fast enough to make it work," he continued, "but this isn't like business school case studies. These are real relationships with real consequences, and I don't have the foundation to manage them. So, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking you should own the majority of this business, and I should find a different career path." "What about Mom and Dad's succession plans?" "Their succession plans assumed I could replace what you bring to the business. That was wrong, and continuing with that assumption is going to destroy everything Dad built." That evening, Colton called a family meeting. This time, he led the conversation. "I've been thinking about our situation," he told Mom and Dad, "and I think we need to completely restructure the ownership plan." "Restructure how?" Mom asked. "Sawyer should get majority ownership. He's the one with client relationships, operational knowledge, and industry reputation. I should focus on finding a career that matches my actual skills." Dad looked stunned. "Colton, you have a business degree. You're the natural choice for ownership. I have theoretical knowledge about business principles. Sawyer has practical expertise in running this specific business. They're not the same thing." The conversation that followed was painful, but necessary. Mom struggled with accepting that her college-educated son wasn't the right choice for running a metalworking shop. Dad had to confront the fact that his assumptions about business leadership were wrong, but the math was undeniable. The business was failing under Colton's leadership and thriving when I handled operations. Client relationships were tied to me personally, not to the company name. By the end of the evening, we'd agreed on a new structure. I would own 60% of the business, Colton would retain 25% while transitioning to a different career. He's now pursuing law school. And Mom and Dad would keep 15% for retirement. The transition back to my operational leadership was immediate. Thursday morning, I called Marcus Flynn. Marcus, this is Sawyer Blackwood. I understand Harrison Steel has been exploring other suppliers. Sawyer, yes, we've had some concerns about Blackwood's ability to provide consistent technical support. I want you to know that effective immediately, I'll be resuming full responsibility for all Harrison Steel projects. The management changes that affected your service level have been resolved. That's excellent news. Can you guarantee that I'll be working with you directly going forward? You have my personal guarantee. And to demonstrate our commitment to the relationship, I'd like to offer a 5% discount on your next project. I appreciate that, Sawyer. Let me call Morrison and let them know we'll be continuing with Blackwood. Similar conversations with Southwestern Construction and Mesa Industrial had similar results. Within 2 weeks, we'd retained about 80% of the revenue we'd been at risk of losing. The past month has been about rebuilding trust with clients and establishing new working relationships within the family. Colton's been incredibly gracious about the transition, and he's genuinely excited about law school starting in the fall. Dad struggled more with adjusting his expectations, but the bottom line results speak for themselves. Revenue is back to normal levels, client satisfaction is higher than it's been in months, and the stress level around the office has dropped dramatically. I'm working about 50 hours a week now instead of 80, still more than normal employee hours, but sustainable for a business owner. I've hired an additional project manager to handle some of the administrative work I'd been doing myself. Mom took the longest to come around, but last week she said something that meant a lot. I still think Colton would have been good at running a business, just not this business. She's right. Colton has great business skills that will serve him well in law or consulting or any number of fields. But running a metalworking shop requires industry-specific expertise that can't be learned in business school. The Morrison Metal Consulting offer turned out to be excellent leverage, but I never had to take it. Morrison was disappointed to lose the potential business, but they understood the family dynamics and respected my decision to stay. Last Sunday, we had family dinner for the first time since the original ownership announcement. The conversation was different, more honest, less formal, with everyone acknowledging that the past few months had been difficult, but educational. I learned something important, Dad said over dessert. Business education and business experience aren't the same thing. I should have valued your experience more highly from the beginning. I learned something too, I replied. I should have asked for formal ownership discussions years ago instead of assuming my contributions would be recognized automatically. The business is stronger now than it was before this whole ordeal started. Client relationships are more secure because they know I'm committed long-term. Operations are more efficient because I have the authority to make decisions without consulting multiple people. And most importantly, everyone understands their role and value in the organization. For anyone dealing with family business dynamics, document your contributions, formalize your agreements, and don't assume that working hard will automatically lead to ownership. Family businesses are still businesses, and business decisions should be based on measurable value rather than educational credentials or birth order. Also, never underestimate the power of simply doing your job and nothing more. Sometimes the best way to demonstrate your value is to let people experience what the business looks like without your extra contributions. The welding torch that built this business is still in my hands, but now I own the shop that houses it, and that makes all the difference.